Let's now talk a little bit about geometry, or rather symmetry. I think we all prefer symmetry in our life, don't we? Just think about all the man-made objects that you are surrounded by in your daily life. So when I refer to an asymmetric partnership, which is also man or woman made, your spontaneous reaction might be that there must be something wrong or at least imperfect about it. Well, let's see. Going back to the key question of my previous lecture, why would you ever want to be in a partnership with someone? The only compelling reason is that he or she has something that you don't, and this something is critical for your business's success. So contributions are key to a partnership, and in a way define it, because it would simply not exist without them. They are also the main criterion for differentiating or classifying partnerships. While contributions of partners are different by definition, for the simple reason just explained that you normally do a partnership with someone who has something that you don't, they may be either similar in nature or not. In other words, they can be either homogeneous or heterogeneous. An example of homogeneous contributions would be a law firm where each partner contributes their skills as lawyers as well as their relationships with the clients. While skills and clients might be different, they're substantially similar in nature. An example of heterogeneous contribution would be in a partnership where, for example, one partner contributes design for new innovative products, whereas the other partner or partners contribute their marketing skills and experience. I call the first kind of partnership symmetrical, based on the substantive similarity of contributions, and the second kind of partnership asymmetric, because the partners' contributions are qualitatively different. Why is this distinction important? Because in the second kind of partnership, it is so much more difficult to measure the contributions of the partners, because they are so different in nature and cannot be compared on the same scale. Yet the viability and sustainability of a partnership depends on the perception by the partners of the fairness of the allocation of interest in the business between them, based on the value of their contributions. If one of the partners believes that the other one gets more out of business in terms of profit sharing than his or her contribution is, this undermines the partnership and makes it inherently, perhaps fatally, unstable. The only way to protect an asymmetric partnership from this danger is to compensate the inherent asymmetry by structural symmetry. I will explain in a few minutes what I mean here. So how to deal with this problem of asymmetric partnerships, i.e. the problem of valuation of contributions? The first key rule here is to treat partners' contributions not as a one-off, like assets contributed to the venture at its foundation, but as an ongoing commitment. Whatever background, skills or know-how they bring into the partnership, their actual contribution is a full involvement in the business on an exclusive basis. Time commitment is the scale on which such heterogeneous contributions can be measured. And this is why exclusivity is so important. It is a guarantee of full 100% commitment to the business. I can send you a very real example from my personal experience. At some point in my legal career, when I had built a considerable reputation and client base in my practice area, I decided to enter into a partnership with younger colleagues who had been my subordinates in my previous firms. One of the reasons for that was that I wanted to shift the focus of my life onto some more personal objectives that were becoming more important to me due to the changes that were taking place in the country I lived in back then. I brought into this partnership a few big clients that initially generated the bulk, about 70% of the business, while my younger colleagues who hadn't been partners before could not match this. This gave me considerable advantage over them, while our interests in the business were equal. I thought my position was unbeatable, and I gradually shifted the focus onto other things, while my partners worked hard to level with me and justify the share in the business that was very profitable, by the way. You can guess what happened at some point. A few years down the road, my partners decided that I was not delivering as much as they, and that I was no longer indispensable for the business. my clients having become also theirs. The fact that I had spent many years building my client base before entering into the partnership, although undeniable, did not carry much weight with them because they were looking forward, not backward. So ultimately, I had to withdraw from the partnership, even though I was able to negotiate quite good terms of exit, or so I thought at the time. Well, in fact, there were other reasons for my withdrawal that I'm not going to elaborate on this lecture because they're not really relevant to our subject matter. Of course, time itself is not a sufficient metric to measure the partner's contribution to the business because we know that time is a relative concept and has no intrinsic value. Despite the saying time is money, even if this is true, it doesn't say how much money. So it's important to agree upfront on the parameters and criteria of valuation and assessment of ongoing contributions of the partners. This may include a detailed allocation of responsibilities between partners based on their skills and experience relevant to the business, and also to avoid duplication. Then, detailed medium-term and long-term plans with a clear allocation of tasks between the partners and with mandatory reviews at the end of each relevant period to assess each partner's performance over this period of time. And finally, this may include agreements between partners on measurable KPIs or key performance indicators for each partner whenever this is possible. The KPIs can be either numerical or not. This would allow assessing the partner's contribution or performance on an ongoing basis. The purpose here is not to base any additional incentives or bonuses on such assessment, but simply to justify the allocation of interest between them based on the notion of equal participation. Now we get to the key question of interest allocation. To the extent that both all partners fully commit to the business, their interest in it should be presumed equal or 50-50 in case of two partners. In fact, I think this is not just a default rule or starting point in negotiations, but effectively the only fair and sustainable principle of interest allocation in asymmetric partnerships. Why? Let me explain. First, this is based on the acknowledgement that each partner is equally committed to the business's success, devoting 100% of their time to it. No matter what skills and experience they bring to the venture, which are impossible to measure, their time is equally valuable and should be treated as such. It doesn't mean that the actual value of their time for the business is equal, but it is impossible, this value is impossible to measure, so the only objective measure is time commitment. Any arbitrary or unjustified inequality between partners introduced at the outset will sow the seeds of discords and likely ultimate failure. Second, this is a simple forward-looking principle motivating each partner to give their best to the business. Remember the mistake that I made in my own case mentioned earlier. I assumed that my past achievement would be sufficient to guarantee my stake in the business. They were not, because my partners were looking forward, not backwards, and they were right at least from their point of view. If you allocate interest in a business unequally, for example 60 to 40%, the partner with the smaller interest would feel like they do not have to do their best because they were put in a second-rate position, so they're unlikely to lay themselves out to make the business succeed. Third, as I mentioned earlier, asymmetric partnerships exist because they create powerful synergies, meaning that partners need each other to create a value exceeding the simple arithmetic sum of their respective contributions. Therefore, they need each other to achieve this effect, and in this respect are perfectly equal. This is a so-called theory of the pie that I mentioned in my previous lecture on reasons for forming a partnership. Its author is Barry Nailbuff, a professor at Yale University School of Management. While the main subject matter of the book and the course he teaches is strategy and methodology of negotiation, the key underlying theory, that of the pie, is equally applicable in a broader context. The basic idea is very simple. When two parties can together create a pie that is larger than what each of them can create on their own, they are equally entitled to a share in that pie, and the only fair way to divide it is to split it equally, hence the title of the book. In fact, the context of his theory is perfectly relevant in our case, because we are talking here about negotiations between future partners on how to divide the pie of their future partnership. Strictly speaking, the theory is fully relevant only in cases where there are two parties, with additional complexities arising if there are more than two parties. However, we do not need to go into those complexities. To keep things simple, I would suggest to apply the same approach even if there are more than two partners involved, unless there is a compelling reason to do otherwise. Yet different treatment can be justified for new partners joining an existing partnership. I will elaborate on this in one of my following lectures on hierarchies within partnerships. To put it another way, if you think that your partner's contribution is worth less than 50% or less than yours, that might be an indication that this partner is not really critical for your business's success. This in turn may indicate that full partnership is not necessary, and you can achieve the goals of your business in other ways which do not involve sharing of profits, such as employment, outsourcing, or what I call light partnerships. This goes back to my initial point covered in the previous lecture, that you should go for partnership only if those alternative options do not work for whatever reason. Finally, unequal interest may also mean not only an equal share in profit distribution, but also unequal rights when it comes to the management of the business, particularly if it's set up in a corporate form such as a limited liability company. I said in my introduction video that this is always possible. In fact, this may even be preferable because it shields partners from unlimited liability. It may mean that the partner with a larger interest may cause the company to take decisions without approval by the partner with a smaller interest. This undermines the collegial nature of partnership, where decision making is based on the consensus of all partners. This may be remedied through proper legal structuring, but you would need an expensive corporate lawyer to fix it for you. This is structural symmetry that I mentioned earlier, designed to compensate for the inherent asymmetry of the partnership. In fact, the principle of equal participation of partners in the capital as a default rule, meaning that it can be contractually waived, is enshrined in the UK Partnership Act dating to 1890. It does mean that even if you are in the UK, you should set up a general partnership under this law. But it does confirm the time-tested wisdom of equal participation rule in partnerships.